All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you get your questions, go ahead and post them. All right, looks like we got maybe a couple in there. All right. So we'll start here with Brooks H says, still having issues with weight shift. Feels right when making a practice swing. Changes when I swing at the ball. Any suggestions? Well, it's hard to say without seeing your swing, but the most common reason why I see people struggle with getting a good weight shift to the lead side is because when we actually make a weight shift with whatever swing fault you maybe have going on, it results in an even worse shot, right? So let me explain what that means. If you're someone who is coming down very steep, right? You're coming down steep and over the top like this, right? Well, if I were to get a really good weight shift and shift to my lead side, well, if I were coming down steep like that, probably hit the ground too far in front of the ball, or I'd really chop down into the ball too much. So what a lot of people do, because they're coming down steep, what they'll do is they'll stay back on their back foot, right? And that allows them to hit the ground where the ball is. So I would imagine that's probably what's happening. In your practice swings, you might be shallowing out the club, and that's allowing you to get a good weight shift to the lead side. Those things match up well together. It could be that in your practice swing, you are having your club bottom out way in front, but there's no ball there. So you may be coming down steep still in your practice swing, but then, getting a good weight shift. And then there's no sense that you're chopping down in the ball because there's no ball there and you're not hitting the ground and things like that. So that'd be something that I would change, because if you're coming down steep, it makes it very, very difficult to get a good weight shift because you're going to tend to, um, you know, hang back on your foot in order to hit a functional shot. Because if you didn't, you would hit an even worse shot, right? So that would be something that I would look at, first and foremost. And to help you to work through that, what I would recommend is working through our 20-minute shallowing fix course. That's a course on the website that is specifically tailored to helping people work through getting the club more shallow. So if you want to check that out, you can click the instruction tab, then click the 20-minute shallowing fix and get started on those drills. That's usually what I see is happening when people tell me I'm really trying to get a good weight shift, but they just can't. It's not that they can't. It's just that if they did, things would be worse in the golf swing. And we want things to be better, right? If we get a good weight shift, we want to hit a better shot, right? So when we change things in the swing, we want to make it better. We don't want to make it worse. So when you're really having trouble changing something in the swing, especially something like that, that's usually fairly easy to do, right? Generally speaking, amongst all things that you can do in your swing, it's one of the easier things to do, right? A lot of times, if that's not happening, it's because if you actually did it, it would make things worse, right? So that's definitely something that I would look at. All right, keep the questions coming. We just got one question so far, so keep the questions coming, and we'll keep answering them. Let me refresh this, make sure. Maybe there are more questions, and I'm just not seeing them yet. All right, that's the only one. So, yeah, keep the questions coming. We'll keep answering them. Excuse me. So Brooks says, thanks. We'll spend more time with the drills. Yeah, no problem. So Charles H says, I feel like I'm taking too large a divot. How can this be fixed? Well, let's talk about what can be happening. So first of all, divots wise, generally speaking, a dollar bill size divot, that is, that's the crown jewel, right? But depending on conditions, you can get different divots, right? So if you're in really soft conditions, in wet conditions, you'll generally take more of a divot because the turf is more, is going to be more receptive to the club kind of going through it, right? If you're playing in really hard, dry, firm conditions, you'll take less of a divot generally, right? If you hit a wedge, right, a wedge where the leading edge of the club is sharper, you're going to generally take more of a divot because that leading edge is going to get into the turf much more easily, and it's going to create a big divot. A lot of times you'll see. I mean, I'll be watching the pros on TV. I'll see them hit a wedge, and they'll be playing in like soft conditions, and you'll see this giant divot. I mean, it's insane how big of a divot sometimes they're taking, and that's just because the leading edge of the club, just getting into the turf, and they're taking divots that are a foot and a half long. Right, that's much bigger than a dollar bill size. So before before you before you declare that you're taking a too large of a divot, what I would do is I would think about those things. What is actually happening, right? Am I playing in soft conditions? Are the conditions wet? Am I really just taking these big divots with wedges? And if it's the case, really that's normal, right? But if you're not playing in those kinds of conditions and you're really hitting down and through too much, taking too big of a divot. If that's the case, then basically what we need to do is we need to get the low point of your swing to be closer to the golf ball, right? So if you think about it this way, if this is the arc that our club is working down, right? Let's say that my fist, my right hand, my fist here is the ball. So basically, I want the low point of my swing. So you can think of that as where the tape is. I want this to be a few inches in front of the golf ball and then slightly below the ball. If we're taking too big of a divot, then what can be happening, and this can change a little bit, by the way. This is just generally speaking. For a wedge, it may be farther in front, right? And for a fairway wood, it may be a little less in front, right? So for a wedge, it may be farther in front and more below the golf ball. And the reason for that is, we want to get spin with a wedge. So if we can hit down on the wedge a little bit more, which would be a bigger divot, we can get more spin. So that's why a lot of times you do see tour players take big divots with wedges, when they're taking these full swing wedges because they're trying to get a lot of spin. And then with a fairway wood, it can be like a couple inches in front of the ball and then a little less below the ball. Still below the ball, but a little bit less below the ball. So if you're getting too deep of a divot, basically what's happening is this, right? So this would be kind of like normal, a few inches in front of the ball and slightly below the ball, right? And then this would be too big of a divot, right? So that would be where you're hitting down on the ball too much. the low point of your swing is too far in front. So a couple things that I would be looking at. One would be your compression line, right? So the compression line is the line that goes from my lead ankle, lead hip, and lead shoulder, right? That is your compression line, right? So if we're too far angled away, we can tend to have too much of an upward angle attack. If we're too far leaning forward, so maybe in your swing you're really leaning forward, you can see how that would promote much more. That would get the low point of my swing to be more forward. Generally, that's typically the case, is that we're just too far forward in the swing. So if that's the case, I'd recommend working on the compression line. There's some great drills in the compression line course. One drill that you can do is to put like an alignment stick outside your hip here, right? And then just make sure that you don't go into that stick, right? So you're shifting to the lead side and then you're turning away from that and not hitting the stick. If we have a stick right here and then we're sliding way forward, we're hitting the stick, that can promote a downward angle attack. So that'd be the number one thing that I would look at if that's the case. But first I would deem, okay, am I really taking big divots? Is this really a problem, right? And if it's not, then that's what I would look at. Or if it's not, then I wouldn't worry about it. But if it is, then I'd work through those. So Reg N says, can you show us an example of one of your swing reviews? I don't know if there's really a way for me to do it on here, but if you go to the swing review page, I believe there are examples of that, unless they've taken them down. Let me double check here. Bear with me here. I'm checking out the swing review page. Yeah, so if you go to the instruction tab, then you go to the swing reviews from the drop down menu. Right at the top of that page, there's an example of a swing review, and then let's see here. I believe there might be another example down here lower. Yeah, and then there's an example of a swing review as well down lower on the page. Yeah, so there's examples if you want to go check them out. If you go to the swing review page, you can see an example of a swing review. All right, let's get back to. All right, so Jeff B says, can you highlight some of the pros and cons of steel shafts and graphite versus graphite shafts? Using steel now, but wondering if and when to change to graphite. 56 years old, 100 mile per hour club head speed, 11 handicap. Thanks. So really, excuse me. The pros of steel shafts are, or at least it used to be, is that they used to be much more stable, right? Graphite shafts used to not be as stable and as consistent because basically, I think that I can't remember exactly how they make them, but basically it's just rolled up graphite, right? And the manufacturing processes have come a long way from my understanding. I'm just going to preface this right now. I'm not a club fitter, nor am I a club junkie. I don't know everything about the clubs. I know a fair amount about the clubs, but I don't know everything about the clubs. So this is probably a better question for someone who's a club fitter. But my understanding is that so steel shafts, they're going to be heavier, right? Because they're steel, right? And they're going to generally be more stable. But in the last few years, the manufacturing processes of graphite shafts have gotten really good, and that stability thing, I'm not sure if that's really much of an issue anymore, right? So, for example, Tiger, even when a lot of guys were using graphite shafts, when the graphite shafts were coming on, right, he still used a steel shafted driver, even though it was heavier and he swung it slower. He did that because it was stable. Right, the graphite shafts at the time weren't quite as stable, and to him, he was really noticing that. He was sensitive to that, so he stuck with the steel shafts for a while other players were playing graphite shafts because they weren't as stable. But that's not really the case anymore. The graphite shafts now are the manufacturing processes are so much better that they are that they're just better. And with graphite, you can really control the weight, right? So you can have a graphite shaft that's really light, and you can have a graphite shaft that's heavier, right? So, what I would say is, the advantage that I would say with graphite shafts is, or with steel shafts, is I would imagine they're more durable. They're going to take wear and tear a little bit better, I would imagine. And again, this is purely anecdotal. I could be wrong about that, but just based on what I've seen, um, you know, of all the clubs that I've broken in my life, they've all been graphite shafts. Every single one of them. I've broken like three, right? But there's three that I've broken, and they've all been graphite shafts. Uh, I've never broken a steel shafted club ever. So they're more durable. So I would say right now for a steel shaft, that's probably the biggest advantage, is that they're more durable. If you want a heavier shaft, there's that too. I would say the other advantage is that they're cheaper, right? Graphite shafts are going to be typically more expensive than steel shafts. So that's really what it comes down to. If you want to know when you should change to graphite, the only really way to know for sure when you should change shafts or anything like that is really just to get professionally fit. That's what it comes down to. I wish I knew, based on you being 56 and knowing your club speed, knowing your handicap, what shafts you need to use. But there's just not enough information. A lot of that information isn't even, your age really isn't relevant to that. Your handicap really isn't relevant to that. Your club head speed can be somewhat relevant to that. But that's really what it comes down to. You have to go get professionally fitted. So if you truly want to know if graphite shafts can benefit you, then what I'd recommend doing is just go get professionally fitted, and you'll know for sure. But you know, the main pro of steel shafts in the past has been that they're much more consistent than graphite shafts. But that's not. I don't think that's really. I don't think that. I think they kind of bridged the gap since then. So. Something definitely to look into if you're looking to get new clubs. All right, so Raj says, I've always used a 48-inch iron near the green, or 48-degree iron near the green. Looking into getting wedges and tried my buddy's 60-degree. There's a lot more swing speed I need to put in to get the same distance. Any tips on the learning well wedges and when to use a much higher loft and club near the green? Really, it's just like if you need to have spin, if you need to carry the ball most of the way to the hole and get it stopped. I'll tell you right now, chipping wise, I don't even carry a 60. I carry a 58. I only hit because it's a much more difficult to hit a 60-degree wedge than it is a 48-degree wedge or a 48-degree club, right? So you're talking like a pitching wedge. And to be honest with you, I probably use my pitching wedge more than anything else to chip around the greens. And that is because it's like what I would call like a 50-50 club. It's 50% carry and 50% rollout. So a lot of what being good at chipping is finding your correct landing spot, right? And with a pitching wedge, it makes it very, very easy to find the landing spot. Because if you hit a solid one, it's going to carry 50% and roll out 50%. Now, obviously, there are some things that can change that. If you are playing very firm and fast greens, it's going to be less carry, more rollout, right? If you're playing slower greens and they're soft, it's going to be more carry and less rollout. If you're downhill, it's going to be less carry, more rollout. You're uphill, it's more carry, less rollout. Right. So there are definitely factors that go into it. But generally speaking, it's going to be about 50-50 club. So that's a big reason why I like using a pitching wedge to chip with, like a 48-degree wedge, because it makes it very, very easy to know where the landing spot. Because really what I can do is I can just kind of step it off and then split it in half and then, step off where the halfway point is and then know exactly where I want to chip to. Right. And I can I can change that based on the conditions, right, of what's going on. I can do it a little bit shorter, a little bit longer, or so on and so forth. So that's, that would be what I look into. Now, when I carry a 58-degree. If I'm chipping with my 58-degree, It's because I need to get spin in some way, or I need to, or maybe it's very fast, right? And I need to just kind of get the ball up in the air and then onto the green, right? Maybe I'm short sighted and I kind of need to open the face a little bit, hit a flop shot. So generally speaking, I wouldn't recommend using a 60-degree around the greens very much unless you absolutely have to. Where I use my 58 degree is in those situations where I kind of need to get it up in the air or I need to get some spin. A bunker shot, I'll use a 58 degree because I need to use the bounce and get it up out of the bunker. So those would be the situations. You see a lot of tour players using high lofted wedges around the green. And the reason is because they're playing extremely firm and fast conditions on the green generally, right? And most of us just aren't playing conditions like that where you need to do that. And even then, tour players aren't using a 60-degree for every shot around the green. They're using it where they need to, even though they're very, very highly skilled with the club. So typically they're only using it when they got to get spin. They don't really have much of a choice for the most part, but most of us aren't going to be in situations like that. So, but if you want to learn how to use wedges, what I'd recommend is checking out our wedge system. Tough Speed Golf wedge system goes through the general, use of learning how to hit wedges. So if you want to check that out, you can click the house icon at the top of the screen. That will take you to the home page. If you scroll down on the home page, you'll see a list of all the courses. You'll see the link for the Tough Speed Golf wedge system, where it goes over how to use wedges. All right, so Don says, so I'm doing better and better on the shallowing fix, but I often hit just a tad fat. So I try to delay the downswing by a split second, or could you go over the proper sequence at or near the top in the beginning of the downswing? So if you're hitting behind the golf ball, that's typically normal. If you're someone who was coming down steep before and now you started shallowing, because as I alluded to in the first question, imagine I shallowed the club so much that I swung too far from the inside. Where's my club going to bottom out? It's going to bottom out more in front of my trail foot. If I'm coming down steep like this, I'm swinging toward, third base, right? I'm going to have that club bottom out more in front of my lead foot. So if you're used to, coming over the top and then hanging back a little bit, and now you shallow out the club and you hang back a little bit, well, then you're going to end up hitting chunks every now and then. So I wouldn't say it's an issue with your down swing sequence or anything like that. It's more of an issue of you're just not getting to your lead side when you shallow it. So what I would focus on is just getting 100% of your weight on your lead foot at impact, right? Start your downswing with pressure in the lead foot. So I want to get here. I'm going to get pressure in my lead foot, and then I'm going to swing from the inside, and that's going to allow you to get ball first contact. So keep adding pressure into that lead foot as you start the downswing. Get to your lead side. Really visualize the club working down into the ball, and you'll start hitting much better shots. If you go up to the top and you're just thinking about everything, sequencing and things like that, that still may not fix the problem. You may still hang back and do the things that you don't want to do. So really just focus on shallowing out the club and just getting to your lead side, and you will make much more solid contact. Yeah, I wouldn't overcomplicate things for sure. So Rick says, working on a draw with my driver and getting a pull or pull hook more often than not. Please explain dialing it back because it's not working for me. Looking for more distance with better accuracy. Thanks. So it sounds like you're just coming down steep with your driver, and this is pretty normal. So for an iron shot or for a driver, we have to shallow out the club more than we do for an iron, right? So if you're hitting pulls and you're hitting pull hooks, that's because your club path is working to the left. You're steep when you're getting to the ball. So if we think about it this way, right? If we imagine that this is how my arc is coming down. So for an iron, my ball position would be fairly close to the middle of my stance, right? So if this is my iron swing, my club's going to be coming down. It's working in to out. It's going out to the right, going out to the right, going out to the right. It's hitting the ball. Then it's turning the corner. Then it's going to the left, right? So if I have the same exact club path for a driver, but now my ball position's up here, right? Now it's going to be up by my left hand. My club's going to be coming down. It's going to be working out to the right, out to the right, out to the right. It's going to turn the corner. and then it's going to start working to the left. And by the time I get to the ball, my club pass is going to be going to the left. That's going to result in pulls usually. It's going to be pulls, slices, or pull hooks, right? And it just depends on where my club face is pointing at this time in the swing. So if my face is square to the arc, right, square to the direction that my club head is moving, it's going to be a pull. If my club face is closed to the direction my club head is moving, then it's going to be a pull hook. If it's open to the direction my club head is moving, it's going to be a pull slice, essentially, right? So what I need to do is I need to neutralize this with my ball position more forward by shallowing out my club more. So now I have a more shallow club, and now my club is going to be working down. It's still going to be working to the right, working to the right. It's going to be working back up, but it's going to be working to the right still. And now I'm going to be hitting the ball with my path going to the right. So really what needs to happen is you just need to do the shallowing fix with your driver as well as the irons, with the understanding that we have to shallow out the club more with the driver because of the ball positions. The ball position is more forward. Now, I know you might be thinking, well, why not just have the ball position in the same place? Well, the problem with that is that we're going to tend to hit down on the ball with our iron, or excuse me, with our driver. And we don't really want to do that because that's going to make the ball come out too low, and it's not going to go anywhere, right? Because the ball's going to come out too low and with too much spin. We want to hit up on it so we can get it up in the air. We can launch it with less spin. That's going to allow it to carry farther and roll out farther, right? So we want to hit up on it. So what we need to do is we just need to shallow out the club more with the driver. So you need to work on getting the ball to start to the right and curve to the left with the driver. And the way you do that is by working through the 20-minute shallowing fix, but working through it with your driver. So to get to the course, click the instruction tab, then click the 20-minute shallowing fix from there. And just work. I know Clay works through the course. You know, he's demonstrating everything with an iron, but you just do the course with your driver and you'll be in good shape with it. So Steve Areno 1 says, Q, I don't usually slice my irons, but I do slice my driver. Advice. Yeah, and you're probably doing so for the same reasons I just talked about. So my advice would be do the same thing that I told Rick. Work through the 20. You have to shallow out the club more with the driver. So work through the 20-minute shallowing fix with your driver, and you'll start to be able to get the ball drawing with your driver as well. All right. We got about 30 minutes left, so keep the questions coming. In the meantime, I'll just be working on some of my other stuff. Okay, so we got a question here from Don. Says, so if I'm understanding you correctly, Rick's question, you have the same tilt of your plane or arc as the backswing, but we should angle the arc more to the right for the driver. Yeah, so basically what we want to do is if I have an iron, right, and I'm shallowing out the club, all right, my club's going to come down with this swing direction, right, with this amount of shallowing. My club's, if my ball position is right here toward the middle of my stance, right, then I can have this swing direction. But if I use this exact same swing direction, right, but now my ball position's up here as it should be with the driver. If I do that exact same swing, well, then what's going to happen is my club's going to bottom out. It's going to work up into the ball, right? And it's going to work to the left with that same swing direction. So what I need to do is I need to get that swing direct. It needs to be more shallowed out. So that way I'm swinging more from the inside, right? And that can get that path to work out to the right when I get to the ball. So if I'm like this, I use the same swing direction for an iron. It's, if I'm coming in pretty neutral with an iron, meaning my club's coming in and I'm pretty close to zero with my path, meaning my club is moving in the direction of my target at impact, right? So that would be, let's say it's in the middle of my stance and then my club is coming in and it's turning the corner right at the golf ball. If that's the case, and then I make that exact same swing with a driver and I contact the ball up here, well, what's going to happen is that my path is going to be to the left. Right? If I'm contacting where my hand is, I have that same swing direction. My club's going to be working to the left. So I need to change my swing. I need my swing direction to be more shallowed out. I need it to be more to the right for it to not be working to the left by the time it gets to the ball. Right? So that's all that needs to happen. So for an iron, right? Where's my iron at? Oh, it's over here. So for an iron, let me get back to my screen here. All right, so for an iron, I may have this club working in just inside my hands, right? So if I have this kind of lined up with my toe line, when we look, when I look at that, I typically see the club head, it's going to be right in there, right? So now with the driver, when I'm coming down, I'll typically see the club head's going to be more like that, right? So here's was an iron, here's a driver, because I need to have this club working more from the inside with the driver because it's going to tend to want to work more to the left as the club works around my body. See here. So Dave M says, please define fluid in a stable fluid spine. So basically what it means is that we're not moving our spine everywhere, right? So I'm moving I'm turning my spine and it's staying in that same section, right? So I'm turning and I'm not moving it this way or this way. It's just one fluid motion, right? It's right there. Right. So I'm not turning and then changing my spine angle, right? I'm not turning and changing my spine angle. It's staying fluid throughout. So Don says, in the past, I think you have said that most of our irons can be positioned around the middle of the stance. Should a full swing sand wedge be positioned also in the middle, or should that be a little bit towards the back of the stance? It can be a little bit back of the stance. So generally, what I say is for ball position, I think a lot of people overcomplicate the ball position a little bit. But I think for most recreational golfers, we really only need to have two ball positions. So we're going to have the ball position for every single shot that we hit off the turf and for our driver, right? So for every single shot that we hit off the turf, we can put the ball position just forward to the middle of the stance. So if I were to put an alignment stick through the middle of my stance here, so equally between my heels, right? So equally between my heels, right? I would have basically the back of the ball be on that line, right? So for every single shot that you hit off the turf, whether it's a wedge or a 3-wood, you can position the ball right there and hit good golf shots, right? And then for the driver, off the lead shoulder is generally a good place to be, right? So off of the lead shoulder, if you were to take a club, put it on your lead shoulder, put it on the outside of your lead shoulder, and then drop it straight down, that would be a good ball position for your driver. So really, you only really need to have two. Now, personally, I just have four, and for the most part, now I may move the ball around in my stance to hit different shots. So if I really want to bring in something lower and hit it lower, I may put it more back in my stance. If I want to bring something and hit it higher, right, I may put it a little bit forward in my stance. But generally speaking, right, the one for off the turf, I'll hit that for most of my shots off the turf. If I'm hitting a wedge, I'll hit it more in the middle of my stance. If I'm really trying to drive it in low, I may be a little bit back of the middle of the stance. And then for like a fairway wood or sometimes a hybrid, I'll put the ball one ball forward of where I normally put it, right? And that just allows me to come in a little bit more shallow, right? A little bit more shallow and get the ball up a little bit more in the air. But we don't. What I see a lot of people doing is they incrementally move the ball forward in their stance with every club that they hit go up with. And then what ends up happening is they move the ball too far forward with their longer club. So they'll have the 3-wood up where they're playing the driver. And then people thin and top their 3-wood all the time and come over the top and things like that. So, if you're hitting a fairway wood, you got to understand we have to have that club bottom out in front of the golf ball. If we're hitting it off the ground, the club needs to hit the ball and then hit the ground in front of the ball. So if we have the ball so far forward, it's virtually impossible for me without really sliding my body forward or coming over the top to get my bottom of my swing to be in front of the ball. So that's probably the biggest mistake that I see with people hitting fairway woods and hitting long irons and stuff like that is that they play the ball so far forward in the stance and it leads to really thin shots. And it's kind of a domino effect because when we hit thin shots, the ball will tend to go lower, right? Because when you hit a thin shot, the ball will hit lower on the face. The face twists down and it de-lofts it, and then the ball goes lower. Well, then we see the ball go lower, so we put the ball farther up in the stance in hopes that will help us to hit it higher. But the problem is that just makes us thin or top it even more, and then we're not fixing the problem. So what we really need to do is we need to trust the loft of the club, right? Trust the loft of the club. The loft of the club is going to get the ball up in the air. If you hit the ball solidly in the middle of the face, the loft will get the club or will get the ball up in the air. So play the ball in a place to where you can make solid contact with the ball and let the ball get up in the air that way. So I know it may seem counterintuitive, but a lot more people will get their fairway woods up in the air a lot better by playing the ball farther back in their stance than where they normally do. Now, I'm not saying play it way back here. I'm just saying play it a little bit forward of the middle of your stance, and more people will be able to hit much, much better and more solid fairway wood shots if they do that. So now, I think a lot of people really look into ball position too much because they've read the Ben Hogan book where he talked about he changed his stance and his ball position for every single club in his bag. Well, if you're at that level and you can really tell the differences between having these little different stances and ball position levels with your swing, and you have really good control of your ball flight, then yeah, do that. But if not, it's not really going to be something that's going to make a difference for you. And you don't have Ben Hogan's swing, which allows him to be able to move the ball a little bit farther up in a stance. So I would recommend just simplify things a little bit, makes it a lot easier. All right, so let's get going. So Raj says, working through the power turn, I recorded my swing and followed the instruction without a ball. Looks fine. When I put the ball there, I get very inconsistent ball striking and repeatedly find myself restricting my hip turn. My issues seem to be rotating my hips in the backswing, which results in inconsistency. Appreciate any input you have. Thanks. I would check your spine angles. If your spine angles are very much all over the place, so if you're not turning around a stable and fluid spine, you're going to generally be pretty inconsistent. So that would be the number one thing that I would change. So you may need to go back to the stable fluid spine course and make sure that you're in good shape there, and then go into the power turn course from there. That would be my recommendation. So Paul SK says, your wet towel shallowing out natural drill. I follow your instructions. Pause and look at my club face. The club face is very open. This seems very wrong. Please show me. So what we want to understand is that shallowing out the club does open up the club face, right? So if I have it like this, and then I go like that, the club face is going to be pointing more up to the sky. So in order to be incentivized to shallow out the club, we have to have the club face in order as well. So what I'd recommend doing is just working through the 20-minute shallowing fix course. That video that I went through, that's more of a supplemental drill to the 20-minute shallowing fix course. If you don't have the club face closed, you will not hit. You have to be incentivized to get the club shallowed out. So, for example, if my club face is very open and then I shallow out the club with an open face, I'm going to hit a push slice. I'm going to hit the ball way far away from the target, right? So I need to have my club face closed so that way when I shallow it out, I can get the ball to curve back toward the target, right? So that's what the 20-minute shallowing fix does. So we have to have the club face closed. So if we're coming down, we're laying this down and the face is wide open and we keep it open, right? We have to have this club face more closed. So that way when we lay it down, see, it's going to be more square as I bring it into contact. So Paul, just work through the 20-minute shallowing fix. That would be my best advice. And if you're really struggling, once you get the club face closed and you're really struggling with the drill number 2, which is the shallowing part of the course, then you can come back to that drill because it's more of a supplemental thing to maybe help you get the feeling of shallowing out the club. Because really what that drill is all about is people tend to try to shallow out the club in the backswing, right? So when I see a lot of people trying to work on shallow out the clubs, what they'll do is they'll bring the club back like this in the backswing, and then in the downswing, they'll come down over the top because basically the momentum of the club is going to be working in that direction, where we actually want the opposite. We want to feel this club. Typically, when you look at better players, they're going to have the club at this point in the backswing, it's going to be in a steeper position than in the downswing. So they'll be, to exaggerate it, they'll be like this in the backswing, that in the downswing, right? That'd be an exaggeration, right? So if you're really struggling and you're trying to shallow out the club in the backswing and then you're steeping it in the downswing, that's going to make it difficult. So I would try to feel like you're a little bit steeper in the backswing, and so that way the club has room to shallow out and work from the inside of the downswing. And that's really what that video can help you to do. So what I'd say, get that face closed first, work through the 20-minute shallowing fix as it's laid out. And if you're really having trouble through it and you're working through it and you're looking on video and you're seeing you're flattening it out in the backswing, in the backswing you look like this, that's where that drill that I talked about would be very helpful. So Paul SK says, I'm 70 years old. Do your methods work with men my age? Every player in the world, anybody that's any good, no matter what age they are, shallows out the club at some point in the swing. So if you're asking in regards to shallowing, yes, absolutely. Any good player shallows out the club. Bernard Longer shallows out the club. He's not 70, but he's got to be getting, I think he's 60 something. I don't think he's too far away from 70. But yeah, any player that's any good is shallowing out the club for sure. So yes. And just to talk about that a little bit more, I'm not saying at 70 years old you're going to be able to look like Dustin Johnson. It's probably not going to happen, right? But you want to do your best version of that, right? So you want to get as good a turn as you can, right? And so on and so forth. So that would be kind of what I'd be kind of thinking of it is you do your best version of whatever it is. You can only do what you're physically capable of doing, but the more you can do what the best players in the world are doing, the better off you're going to be. You're not necessarily going to be able to get into certain positions, right? You're not going to be able to get your hips, like this at impact, most likely, because you probably don't have the flexibility. I don't have the flexibility to do it, at 37. So, you have to just do your best impression of whatever it is. All right, we got about 10 minutes left. If we get any more questions. So Greg O says, "Hi. When you use the stick to extend the club to practice shaft lean, could you demonstrate how that works in a full swing?" Yeah. So what I would do is I would start with shorter and slower swings at first, and then work your way up to longer and faster swings. So you can get it to where that stick doesn't touch you if you turn your wrist the correct way, right? So if I go to a full swing, right, I can get here, and when I'm coming through, right, I can basically feel this club kind of go, almost feel like it's going up a wall, right? So if you kind of look at it from this direction, we imagine this wall's right here. I'm here, and then I'm going to feel like this club head, instead of flipping my wrist through like this, I may feel my wrist do more of this motion, right? So my wrists are going to stay in that position, that extended position. And I'm going to feel like this. So this is kind of like the Tommy Fleetwood finish, what we call the umbrella finish, right? Where you're coming through and you're coming through more like that. So if you look at it from this angle, right, coming through, the stick's not touching me, right? And you can see how my wrist is staying in this. So if I show you from this angle, right, my wrist is kind of staying in that bent back position like that, right? I would say there's lots of, this is one of the shaft lean. Everyone wants it. Everyone wants shaft lean. Everyone wants it. But to be honest with you, it is not the end all be all to play better golf. You don't have to have crazy amounts of shaft lean to be good at golf. Look at Tom Kim. Tom Kim has very little shaft lean at impact, and he's a pretty dang good professional golfer. So, we have to think about the return on investment with a lot of these things. What I'm trying to get golfers to do, I'm trying to put them in a position where they can make ball first contact, right? So if they have the ball on the ground, they can make ball first contact. Shaft lean can help with that. As long as we have some, we're in good shape. Which pretty much, I don't work with very many golfers. I don't see that many golfers who are like this at impact, who have basically negative shaft lean. If you have the shaft leaning to afford whatsoever at all, then if you have some shaft lean, now you might see you have an early release, right? But if you have some shaft lean, you're going to be able to make ball first contact. That's not what's stopping you from being a good golfer, right? I'm also looking at some face control, right? So is the club face very open as we're coming down? If it is, then we want to get that club face in a better position. We're also looking at, where's the club coming down? How's the club arcing down to the ball, right? So is the club coming down like this with an open face? It's going to be hard to play better golf. But one thing that I see all the time is I'll get students come to me who want shaft lean. They want shaft lean, but they're coming down steep with an open face, and you're not in a position where you're. If you think about, so let's say we worked on helping that golfer have shaft lean, the golfer that's going like this, over the top, open face, and then they have the flip, right? I know the thing that sticks out to them might be the early release. That's the thing that sticks out to them the most. But that golfer is very, very far away from getting the shaft lean that they want, because they're going to have to get the club in a better position, get the face in a better position, and then they're going to have to work on shaft lean. So the stick drill is a good drill to help you, to give you feedback on whether you're doing shaft lean correct. And it's typically what I have students do who want to have shaft lean. But a lot of times what we have to understand is that changing that part of the swing is the most it's not even close. It's the most difficult thing to change in the golf swing, and is because it changes so many factors in the golf swing, and the return on investment, right? The return on time investment to change that is not always the highest. Most golfers are going to be better off just making sure that they're getting the club to work down in a good spot. They're able to make ball first contact. They're getting the club shallowed out, right? They're doing those things, and would actually be better off putting some time in on their short game, putting some time in on their putting, putting some time in on their distance wedges, right? Putting some time in on their mental game, right? Those are all things that are going to be way easier to get better at golf than the time that is required to change that part of the swing. And the other part of the reason why it's the most difficult is because it's happening at the fastest point in the swing. And most people just do not have the patience to be able to change it or to work on it, because you have to do it very, very slow at first. If you have the idea that you're just going to grab that stick and you're just going to be able to do that in a full swing, won't happen. I can tell you right now, it will not happen. If your natural pattern is to early release the club, you will not be able to do that stick drill. I mean, it'll be difficult for you to do it a short and slow swing. There's absolutely no way you're going to be able to do it in a long, fast, full speed. You're going to smack yourself every single time, and you're going to get very frustrated. So what I would recommend doing is, honestly, don't work on that. Work on the other things. If you at least have some shaft lean, I wouldn't worry about it whatsoever. But I prescribe it with a lot of students because they don't care what I say. They just want to work on it anyway. Even though I know they're not going to put the time and the effort. They're going to give up on it at some point. That's just what happens. So if you have some shaft lean at impact, I would say you're 100% fine. Don says, when do you know it's time to take a particular part of the course to the course? And in the meantime, how do you reconcile what you are trying to learn at the range and swinging you old way when playing around? Well, basically this reminds me of a quote from Tiger. He said, first I understand what I need to do, then it looks better, then it feels better, then it performs better in practice, then on the course, then finally in a tournament. That's basically the process that you want to go through. So if it's performing really well in your practice, that's when you know to take it to the course. And then understand that it's not going to perform as well on the course as it is in your practice. So it's going to take some time for it to start performing well on the course. All right, so Roz says, question on ball impact on the driver face. I've got it teed up on a 3/4 inch tee. Ball center line is above the top of the driver face when sitting stationary. Trying to hit up on the ball, meaning the club past the low point, working up the swing arc, as I understand. I'm still getting impact on the lower half of the driver face. Thanks. So you might be hanging back, right? You might be hanging back like this, and the contact's getting too high in the face. So I'd make sure that you're getting your body forward. You may be swinging too much up on it. You may want to tee it up a little bit higher, right? So I just look on video and see what you're doing there. So Paul SK says, I actually was referring to ingraining all these very new muscle memories. Yes, I am flexible. I do tummy, shoulders, my hips. I do turn my shoulders, my hips. Still, the lag is ingrained timing. I maybe got 5 years of golf remaining. I do not have a handicap. I simply want to enjoy golf. Enacting all try these brand new positions when I take them out on the range or the course have resulted is very frustrating. That's why I meant about 7 years old. I began golf when I was 53. That's 16 years of incorrect muscle memories. Yeah. So what I would say is the longer you've been playing golf and the older you are, the more difficult it is. And I would say it's more about the longer you've been playing golf, but the more difficult it is to make changes to create new motor patterns, right? So if you want to just enjoy your golf, what I would recommend doing is not make big swing changes, right? What I'd recommend doing is just work on your awareness of where the ground is, your awareness of the club face, work on your awareness of your face and your path, and you would only really make changes to your swing that encourage it, that directly reflect on those things. Most people I see have functional golf swings, meaning they can hit a shot that goes toward the target without a lot of curve, right? So they can hit the ball, they can make ball first contact, they can hit the ball in the center of the face, they can get the club working down in a good spot. They can get the face squared up, and they can do all those things at the same time, right? So if you can do all those things at the same time, then you have a functional golf swing, right? Now there could be some things that you can upgrade with your technique, but those things require a lot of hard work and repetition, and it's not something that you may have the patience for at this point in your golfing career. So what I'd recommend doing is just work on your timing of things, work on your ability to control things, right? So technique is how you move, whereas skill is your ability to control the way that you move. So if your technique is fine enough that you can hit a functional shot, and again, that'd be a shot where you make ball first contact, center face contact, you have the club working down to the ball on pretty close to on plane, and then you have the club face pretty close to square, right? If you can do all those things at the same time, you have a functional golf swing. Now, that could be a golf swing where you early extend and flip. That might be a golf swing that looks like that. That is a functional golf swing because that golf swing allowed. Now, is it going to be super consistent? No, it's not because your thing's going to be dependent on timing, but you can improve your timing. But changing this is going to require a lot of time and patience. And whereas improving your skill and your timing, you can start doing that right away. So, Paul, what I'd recommend for you is just to work through the ball striking masterclass because that's going to allow you to improve your skill, your ability to control the way that you move, and that's going to help you to enjoy golf a lot more. Swing change is not for everyone. What we have to understand is when we make a swing change, it's going to be very uncomfortable. It's typically not going to be super fun, which is why a lot of people don't do it because it's not easy, right? Now the con to that is that if you don't make a swing change, right, then you're essentially capping your potential, right? You can only get so good with a swing that if you want to play on the PGA Tour, you're not going to be able to do it doing this, right? It won't happen because you can build up all the skill in the world and it's just going to be very, very difficult. But you can play better golf, right? So that's really what I would be looking at then, based on what you said. So Charles A says, should you swing 100% as hard as you can on every shot with every club, or pick an effort level that has to be more consistent? Yeah, I would only swing 100% as hard as you can when you're speed training, but your playing speed swing should be basically. Tiger's dad told him he didn't care how hard he swung as long as he hit the ball in the middle of the face. So it doesn't do you any good to swing 100% all effort if you can't make good contact with the ball. So what I would say is, you swing, and a lot of people's view of what 100% effort is not always the same. Some people 100% effort actually means 100% effort. Some people 100% effort is really like 90%, right? So you got to keep that in mind as well. But basically, you swing as hard as you can to be able to control the impact variables. So if you can swing hard and be able to hit the ball in the center of the face, make ball first contact, get your club face in your path on in a good spot, then that's how hard you can swing. If that's 100%, sure, but I would say a majority of golfers aren't doing that. Majority of golfers are swinging at an effort level that allows them to control those variables. Speed takes away feel. So if we try to swing with more effort or more speed, right, where we lose feel for we can lose feel for those things, and it can make it difficult to be able to hit the ball better, right? So anyway, good question. We'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. Thanks everybody for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you next time.